Hi friends, this is your APN'S and in this video I will present an historical overview of British Romantic literature. If you are a student of third semester and if you are studying in Odisha, then watch this video completely. After watching this video, you will be able to understand what is Romantic Revival. What were the influences of French Revolution of 1789 on Romantic Revival? What do we mean by organic relationship between man and nature? And what is Romanticism versus Classicism? All these ideas, all these things are included in this video, and these things are making your first unit of core paper V of Odisha State Model Syllabus. I will explain all those things one by one. Now let us begin by discussing Romantic Revival. The Romantic Revival is equal to Romantic Era or the Romantic Period. If I say Romantic Revival, it means Romantic Era, it means Romantic Period. All these three words mean the same thing. Nothing to get confused. Now, what is Romantic Revival? Or what is Romantic Period? Romantic Revival is a period of time. It is a period of time in Western art, music and literature. Yes, Romantic period is a period of time and it roughly begins from 1770 and continues up to 1850. Yes, Romantic Revival is a period of time in Western art, music and literature which begins from 1770 and continues up to 1850. During this period, artists, musicians and writers showed a tendency, showed a passion to break away, to go away from the classical ideals. Classical ideals had dominated the previous era. But the writers, the artists and the musicians, they showed a tendency to break away from the classical ideals. Instead, they focused on emotions, nature and individualism. So, two things I would like to highlight. There was a tendency to break away from the classical ideals, and there was a focus on emotions, nature and individualism. Now if somebody asks you, what are the characteristics of Romantic era? Then just tell them, there was an emphasis on imagination and spontaneity. Remember these phrases, imagination and spontaneity. There was emphasis on imagination and spontaneity during Romantic era. There was an interest in the supernatural and the exotic. There was a fascination with the past. Fascination with the past, particularly medieval and folk cultures. So these are the dominant characteristics that we find during Romantic era. There was an emphasis on imagination and spontaneity. There was an interest in the supernatural and the exotic. And there was also a fascination with the past, particularly medieval and folk cultures. Some of the most well-known Romantic era artists and writers include William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, John Keats, Lord Byron, Jane Austen and the Brontë sisters. Now let us explore the relationship between the French Revolution and the Romantic Revival. The French Revolution, which began in 1789, had a powerful impact on the Romantic Revival in many ways, in several ways. The revolution sought to overthrow the monarchy and it sought to establish a republic. The revolution sought to overthrow the monarchy and establish a republic. This marked a dramatic change, a dramatic break from the past and represented a new, more egalitarian way of thinking. What is egalitarian way of thinking? The philosophy of giving equal opportunity to all is the way of egalitarians, and it was the ideal of the day. This new way of thinking influenced the ideas and themes that emerged in literature and art during Romantic era. Secondly, the French Revolution also led to a renewed interest in the medieval and folk cultures. Yes, remember this part of the sentence. There was a renewal of interest in medieval and folk cultures. People sought to reclaim their national heritage. That's why there was interest in the past, and it was reflected in the Romantic era's fascination with medieval literature and art. There was a revival of traditional costumes, and folk tales. Thirdly, the revolution also had a profound impact on the political and social climate of the time. The ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity were central to the revolution. This led to a new emphasis on individualism, personal freedom, and self-expression. Such ideas like individualism, personal freedom, and self-expression are also the central themes of Romantic era. The Romantic poets and the writers of the era, for example, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, were directly influenced by French Revolution, and their work reflects their reactions to the revolution. Now, let us move on to the next point. The organic relationship between man and nature. Yes, Romantic ideals emphasized on the organic relationship between man and nature. What is that? It is simply the natural bond between humans and the environment. This idea was rooted in the belief that nature is an embodiment of divine. Nature is an embodiment of divine, and nature has the power to heal human spirit. The Romantics believe that man's connection to nature is essential for his or her emotional and spiritual well-being. Emotional and spiritual growth cannot happen without having a connection with nature. This was the belief of the Romantics. Now, let me come to the last point, Romanticism versus Classicism. During the British Romantic era, there was a tension, there was a tussle between the ideals of Romanticism and the reality of Classicism. Ideals of Romanticism was at one hand, and the reality of Classicism was at another hand. And there was always a clash, always a tension between these two ideals, the ideals of Romanticism and the reality of Classicism. Romanticism emphasized the importance of individualism, emotional expression, and natural world, while Classicism advocated the traditional social hierarchy and the rigid class divisions. Remember, the traditional social hierarchy and the rigid class divisions. These were the ideals of Classicism, and these things were defining British society at that time. On one hand, Romanticism celebrated the individual and the subjective experience and rejected the strict societal norms and constraints of the era. Societal norms, constraints of the era, all these things were rejected by the Romantics. Romanticism championed the common person and celebrated the beauty and power of nature. However, Classicism was deeply ingrained in British society. Classicism upheld the rigid social hierarchy, and it was defining that era, whereas the Romanticism was opposing it. The upper classes were seen as superiors, and the lower classes were often marginalized and excluded from the dominant culture. This class division was also reflected in literature. In the literature of this period, the upper class characters and their experiences were often portrayed as more desirable and worthy of attention. This tension between Romanticism and Classicism is also seen in the way the Romantics viewed the Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution was a major social and economic change during the Romantic era. On one hand, the Romantics celebrated the individual and the natural world and saw the Industrial Revolution as a corrupting force that threatened to destroy the beauty of nature. Industrial Revolution was considered as a corrupting force by the Romantics. On the other hand, the Industrial Revolution brought wealth and prosperity to the upper classes and provided them with the means to maintain their power and dominance over the lower classes. So in conclusion, we can say the British Romantic era was marked by a tension, marked by a tussle, marked by a clash between the ideals of Romanticism and the limiting forces, the constraints of Classicism. Romanticism celebrated the individual and the natural world, whereas Classicism upheld the traditional social hierarchy and the rigid class division and that defined British poetry society at that time. Dear friends, the note of this video is also available. Please go through the description box.